And when I started looking at what we do in Brazil in terms of cultural and linguistic diversity regarding our these practices, it was a little bit disappointing. My English is a little rusty, people, so bear with me.
You're doing good. You're doing good.
Okay, I'm not going to delay talking where I'm working and where I am advising students. I'm going to tell you, though, that I work for almost 40 years. I study for almost 40 years and work for almost 35 with craniofacial anomalies. That's been the focus of my interest in my studies and is what I teach at the University of São Paulo. And I study cleft lip and palate, and my specialty is velopharyngeal dysfunction, particularly the role of the SLP. So when we think about what we can share and how we can look into the linguistic and cultural perspective when sharing what I do, I want you to think that we are in different, located geographically in different hemispheres of the globe. The University of Central Florida is all the way in the North Hemisphere. The University of São Paulo, all the way in the South Hemisphere. We don't share the same time zone. We don't share the same weather. So here is starting summer. You guys are starting winter. But it's not only these differences that separate us. You will see as I look into how my profession in Brazil approaches cultural and linguistic diversity, you will see that we look at this in a different way. And this is why I'm hoping we can connect and have a partnership for exchange in the future. So we start having two different first languages. And I always have to remind a lot of people that Brazilians do not speak Spanish. Nothing wrong with Spanish. However, our native language is Brazilian Portuguese. And we are not Hispanic. We are Luso-Portuguese. This is one thing that still today, when I go to meetings, people talk to me. And we are always asked to speak in Spanish. And I usually say, I speak Spanish, but because I was married to a Puerto Rican and I learned. However, I met Linda Rosa Lugo and I improved. But my native language is Brazilian Portuguese. When we think about Brazil, we do have a mixed ethnic background here. African, indigenous, and Europeans colonized our country after indigenous were here. Africans were brought by the Europeans as slaves. We share a similar colonization with the North America. However, what this leads to is that even though our legislation says that racial and ethnic discrimination are illegal, we have large disparities between white Brazilians and Brazilians of mixed ethnic backgrounds. Just recently, our people from mixed backgrounds have got access to university. So in my campi, there are no African people, there are no faculty with African ancestry. I have to be careful on the way I use the language. This is another thing that in Brazil we are not as careful as in North America, but it's incredible when you think on this. Of course, indigenous much less present in the universities as students and as faculty also. And then before I talk, I went into the UNESCO, which is the United Nations Educational, Scientific, and Cultural Organization, and took a look of what was there about Brazil. And I look into the diversity, and within the diversity of cultural expressions in Brazil, I found a lot of material, both in English and Portuguese. So this is something important to keep in mind when you are working with somebody or establishing a relationship with somebody that doesn't speak the same language as you. There are a lot of resources that are translated online. So I just look into this today. And I would like you to think together with me that I propose this reflection that we can talk later. That to understand cultural expression of a population, it is important to understand its native language. Even though you find material that are translated, the more access you have to the native language materials, the closer you are to understand cultural expressions. You can debate this later, okay? However, and this is something I am saying now, to understand and manage communication disorders of a client that do not speak our first language, the clinician first language, even though I might be monolingual and I will not be able to learn his language, the more I understand the cultural expressions of his country, the better I can relate with my client and the closer I can get. Linda, you were going to say something?
No, I think especially in this class, we have talked a lot about the importance of the primary language, and then also really looking at the acquisition of the additional language, which in this issue is English. But I do really love the fact that you really have tied in this real importance of understanding not only just the language, and if you don't understand it, because we do have many monolingual speech language pathologists, that at least to understand the context under which you're going to find a client or a patient, which is, their cultural context, for you to be able to understand how you're going to work with them. So, for example, cleft palate in Brazil, as well as deafness in Brazil, because that's my area. When I went to Brazil, it was very, I don't know, chocante, very striking, I guess, for lack of a better word. With deafness in the United States, we use sign language a lot. When I went to Brazil, it is an oral country with deafness. And so I really had to learn sign language as they were acquiring sign language, because it is something new in Brazil. And what was really interesting is most of our signs, when we're signing in the United States, most of our signs are large and they come forward. The location of the signs in Brazil are different. Mm-hmm. So just something that I had to learn to be able then to work within the context of deafness in Brazil. So I just wanted to share that.
It's nice that you brought this up. And one thing that I want to leave here as we move on in this presentation is that I think that you can be a very good monolingual clinician. However, to reach your client, you need to get closer to the client's cultural expression. So you did that by learning the Brazilian Sign Language, or attempting to learn the Brazilian Sign Language, and you are trying to understand our students and what they learn we are an oral country. We don't have the deaf culture here. So if a child does not develop oral language, the deaf child does not develop oral language in Brazil, there is very little that child can do in this country. So that's part of the culture of the country that I think can be learned, even though you don't speak Portuguese or Mandarin or Spanish or Korean or whatever language your client speaks. I speak Portuguese and Spanish, and I went to Atlanta for 1 year and to work with a craniofacial center there. And I was in charge of all Hispanic population and everybody else that came from another country. And I was in this way, speaking Spanish when I had clients that spoke Mandarin. So English, when I had clients that spoke Mandarin. So the way that I approached it, I started learning about talking to the parents, going into the internet, learning about their cultures, and then use the clinical interactions to learn language words in Mandarin. So what I wanna, even though I'm going to keep talking about the importance of second language, and of course, clinicians who speak other languages, it was much easier for me to work with the Hispanic population, and I spoke Spanish, even though Puerto Rican Spanish, it was very different than Spain from the Spanish from Spain, different from the Spanish from Chile, and but still it is Spanish. And but I still could work with clients that I didn't speak my language. Okay, so UNESCO also talk about the importance of linguistic diversity, understanding that diversity and multilingualism today is essential for sustainable development. So it's very important to know other languages, but it doesn't mean that I cannot get closer to clients just because of monolingual. I thought I should say that. I'm not going to go over that slide. We have 8 countries, 8 nations that speak Portuguese. And in the map, we can see Portugal, the islands of Cabo Verde, Guinea-Bissau, and Guinea Equatorial in Africa, Brazil, Angola, Mozambique in Africa, and then Timor-Leste in Asia. So those are the countries that speak Portuguese. And I can tell you, if I go to Portugal, there are several idioms that I cannot understand. So I have to study when I interact with my colleagues there, and be careful with the things that I say.